As we hit the top of the hour, I think everybody has probably joined who's planning on it. So why don't we get started? Good afternoon, good morning.
Mute everyone.
Yep, mute everyone.
Hello.
Yep, if everyone could please mute. Welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Let's get started. I'm Ann Doyle with Internet 2. And I'm pleased to be hosting our presenters today. We are all part of a program committee that designs a series of workshops called the Network Performing Arts Production Workshops that focus on the use of advanced networks like Internet 2 and Giant for performing arts education, multi-site performances, remote auditions, and more. We had to cancel our workshop this April due to COVID-19, and all of us have been being asked by many people around the world if we could share some of the tips we have, some of the advice we have for online education, especially in the performing arts, when so many faculty and students have quickly had to move to online learning. So let me share my screen and we'll just get started with a little bit of context setting. If you allow me 1 minute here, I'll get set up. All right, good. You can all see the screens?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see the slides. Okay, great. So just to set the context, these are some of the key participants in the United States that have been involved in this realm. This session is being recorded. The slides will all be available later. So if we go through things quickly, just know you can come back to them. These are some of the key participants in Europe that have been very involved in this whole realm. And just to set the context for the workshops, we invented and designed this workshop in 2004. Internet 2 and New World Symphony came together and said there's some really unique areas of expertise in the audiovisual realm and the advanced networking realm that need to learn from each other and come together to be successful in doing performing arts over advanced networking. So New World Symphony, with much gratitude to you all, have hosted many of these workshops. And now we host the workshops every other year in the United States, every other year in Europe. And you can see by this list, we've had some remarkable hosts in Europe. And the workshop this year was going to be hosted at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And we had to cancel it, but they have committed to hosting in 2021, probably right around this same time frame. So we look on our website, we'll keep you posted when this workshop will end up being rescheduled. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Domenico Vicinanza, who is my counterpart at Giant in Europe, and he would like to say a welcome to you all. Domenico?
Thank you very much, Anne, and welcome to you all. As Anne mentioned, it's a pleasure, it's an honor for us to host this webinar to see that for me, it's wonderful to be here with you all, and it is wonderful to see that we are here regardless of all the issues. And I think now more than ever we are together. Next one, Anne. Thank you. And we are, and being a community means that we need and we want to support each other, and this is the main reason behind this webinar. And we are supported from a technical point of view by a global network. Giant is the European Network for Research and Education. It connects all the national research and education networks in Europe, and that means connecting conservatoires, music research centers, academies, and Gent and Internet2 share a long history of collaboration and friendship. And so together we have several links across the Atlantic, enabling researchers, artists, people working in education to do a absolutely wonderful, unique job to be and to be a unique community across a global scale. So that's my welcome, and I'm really looking forward to welcome the next speaker. So Anne, floor to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Domenico. I would like to introduce our next speaker, Renata Kreil from Aconet, and she is going to help set the context of what we're talking about. What is streaming? Renata, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. So we decided to dedicate the following minutes to clarify the differences between live streaming and interactive live streaming from the standpoint of performing arts over advanced networks. Since the beginning of social distancing, the individual lifestyles changed a lot, as well the entire culture and community, art and culture community is strongly influenced by it. Many reacted very fast, reorganized themselves and entertained, communicate or teach and reach the audience via the World Wide Web. Do you hear me?
Yes, Claudia, can you mute your microphone, please?
Okay, I go further. So from institutions to single artists, especially via the social media, there is a lot of creative traffic at the moment, and I'm enthusiastic about the increasing amount of artistic content that occupies the internet at the moment and creates space for itself. And I hope it will proceed long after the epidemic is over. And that's, I think, also why we're talking about it in context to quality. My aim is to give you an overview about streaming, live streaming, and interactive live streaming by focusing on the relationship between sender, forwarder, and receiver. In this case, I talk about our audiences. Audiences who normally go to theaters, concerts, dance performances, and so forth. And you cannot reach at the moment there. And please, slide 2. I want to emphasize the inherent power of producing from the sender's perspective. Perhaps it is now the right time to regain this power back, or in other words, to change passivity consuming into activity producing. Hermann Rothe from the MDW University of Music and Performing Arts, Vienna mentioned it lately, and I think it's worth to reflect on this thought. This is a good moment to bring latencies into play, the minimizing of latency better. It is not only a time management aspect, it is a critical factor for the quality of your communication and artist interaction. So what is streaming? The simultaneous data transfer of audiovisual data via the internet, respectively the World Wide Web. Correct. But furthermore, we have to ask ourselves many questions. What are our intentions, or for what? What means simultaneous? Do you hear me?
Yes, I think there is a technical problem because people are entering the room with the microphone unmute. Please mute all and let only the speaker on. Thank you. Or Anne, please mute everybody and let Renate only the one. Mute all, Anne. And now, Renate, you can continue.
Thank you. And would you be so nice and go back to slide number 2? back to slide number 2. Back. So sorry, I will go further. I repeat the last sentences. So, because it's important. I really want to emphasize the inherent power of producing from the sender's perspective. Perhaps it is now the right moment to regain this power back, or in other words, to change passivity, consuming, into activity, producing in this context. Hermann Rother from the MDW University of Music and Performing Arts Vienna mentioned it lately, and I think it's worth reflecting on this thought. It is a good moment to bring latencies into play. The minimizing of latency is especially. It is not only a time management aspect, it is a critical factor for the quality of your communication and finally artistic interaction. So what is streaming? The simultaneous data transfer of audio-visual data via the internet, respectively the World Wide Web, correct. But furthermore, we have to ask ourselves many questions. What are our intentions, or for what? What means simultaneous? Do we talk about seconds or milliseconds? And do we talk about compressed or uncompressed data? What level of quality we can offer and what level of quality we dream of in order to convince our audiences, online and offline. So let's talk about the opportunities. And please, the next slide. Yeah. So because I look at this topic of the sender-receiver connection, so streaming means we just have finally the basic data to be sent are not changeable. And it's a one-way street. We stream and there is no opportunity that the audience can interact or respond in any way. By the way, at this point, and of course this webinar is no competition between commercial networks and NRAN networks, but in general, it could be worth to compare the business models or the different providers to meet your requirements, again, in the context of sending, concerning bandwidth, traffic damping, jitter, and so forth. And for that, I learned you have to formulate your requirements precisely. So let's go to live streaming. Thank you, Anne. So there are two examples, live streaming in the sense of a live concert. So the sender, the source is live. So for example, the New Year's concert of the Wiener Philharmoniker, it's live. But there is no interaction with the audience, so there is receiver possible. Or other examples, dance productions, heavy metal concerts, and so forth. In this case, the artists are in general all at the same location or venue. There is, of course, also a live streaming between teacher and students, but about this my colleagues will talk later. There is an interaction possible. Please go to the next slide, please, Anne. Interactive live streaming, please. No, before? Yes. So that's the next point, and that's the work. We are already working quite a while on it, and that's the reason why we installed the NetArt Communication Center. So now we talk about interactive live streaming. And in this case, of course, the latencies become extremely important as well. To use high-speed networks, which are offered by NRANs, are significant. You cannot do it with low bandwidth network at the moment. And I'm talking about artists who are on different places, who are distributed, and about this interaction. For that reason, we need these networks, and furthermore, we have to use so-called low latency technologies. it's mandatory. And also for these low latency technologies, we in our performances, in our multi-site performances use, for example, LoLa, Ultracrit. We need as well the high-speed networks. It's not only about latencies, it's also about the quality of the data you send. It's about uncompressed data partly. And in this case, the sender-receiver relationship is very high, especially when the receiver and sender, the artists, have to interact, and the distributed artists have to interact at the same time and all at once. So as well, NRAN network as well, special and relevant low latency technologies are significant to execute such a performance. As well, the sender-receiver relationship, artist-audience, can be interactive. And also here, it's about the quality of the audiovisual data which are experienced by the audiences, which are online and offline, is very, very important to somehow become a near relationship to your receiver, in this case, audience. So I really want to emphasize to work on it and go into it. Finally, please, the next slide, Anne. The multi-site performance. Yes, thank you.
Yes, and I'm just doing a quick polite time check.
Okay, I'm ready soon. Okay, just to come to an end and to find the closing. For multi-site performances, we use all above mentioned streaming systems. We use for the interaction, interactive live streaming for artists who are on locations with low bandwidth. These guys are integrated via live stream. So the signals are integrated in the artistic concept, but no real interaction is possible. And our audiences have access via visiting real venues and have as well access via live streaming simultaneously in the World Wide Web. And later, of course, we can use the recordings for documentation and for streaming on demand. So thank you for the last slide, Anne. I really, it would be a pleasure if I can interest and invite you to visit our website. And I really hope I can interest you that the scene for producing multi-site performances will grow. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Renata. Our next presenter is Jesper Andersen from the Royal Danish Academy of Music.
Yes, hello everyone. So greetings from Copenhagen, and I am Jesper Andersen here at the Royal Danish Academy of Music, where I'm an associate professor at the Tonmeister department. But also I work, so that means I work with the sound engineering, music engineering, but also I work a lot with our distance learning program here. When I say here, I'm not actually in the building because it's closed down now. So I'm at home. This is my bedroom. That's the room in my apartment with the best light conditions to do video conferencing. So I'm sitting here now. And I would like to give some really basic tips and talks about teaching online, especially for people who are quite new in this area. So we say within performing arts for this session, but mainly my focus will be within music. Yes, I have the RE20 microphone. That's correct. My headset broke, so I've been running around finding something good. So you can see I'm a sound engineer. I have the Fraser radio broadcast microphone right here. So I hope you can hear me really well. So And if you can skip maybe just 3 or actually 4 slides ahead would be good, because I think I have them. So I'll be talking about some limitations, some possibilities, and then a little bit about etiquette of video conferencing. Right now, as far as I can see, we're 138 people in the same room. And of course, if we're 138 people actually in the physical same room, we have one way of interacting, but when we are like this online, we will probably interact quite differently. And then finally, I want to say a little bit about network audio and video. But actually, Justin, that will be talking after me, has some more to say about that than I want to do. So I'll prioritize my time for the 3 first parts. But if you can skip to the next one, Anne, please. Then just to say a little bit about the limitations. Yes, thanks. So first of all, what we hear all the time from teachers within music education here is that they want to play together with their students, because this is a normal way for hundreds and hundreds of years of doing music teaching, that we are playing together and actually live interacting. And I'm sorry to say that we cannot play together. When we're talking about home networks and home systems like Zoom we're using now, or Skype, or a lot of FaceTime, there are so many of these systems, it is not possible to play together. The delay for a connection like this might be something like half a second. So that means to play together is not possible, but also any other live interaction like conducting, something like that is not possible. And I even want to say, when we talk about playing together, even to do this on the fastest network ever, it still will be problematic to play together all over the planet. I know I used to, and many other people have this dream that someday we can all log into one global jam session and just play together all over the planet. But I can say that actually the speed of light is really not fast enough to transmit the signal all around the globe. So we can play together perfectly. So I'm here in Copenhagen, and if I send a signal with the speed of light to New York, the delay will probably be something like 23 milliseconds for that distance. And that is actually just on the edge that we will perceive a delay as musicians interacting. So, and that's even Copenhagen to New York. So if you imagine me playing with someone in Sydney, the delay will be so big that actually we don't play together. At least we will have to play some music that does not have a really perfect timing. So teachers will have to adapt the way they teach to a certain teaching method, where there's actually sort of an interaction where you take turns when you're, so the student will play and the teacher will reply. So if you move on, and then the next, these are actually, yes, thanks. These are actually sort of the negative things when I'm talking about limitations, because the next thing is that the sound will not be perfect of what we're doing. I think for speaking now, the sound will be pretty good, and speaking conversation works really well. But to get all the fine nuances of a musical instrument is not possible to transmit through a signal like this. If you imagine the rhythm and the beat and also the pitch information will translate quite nicely, but the timbre, so the color of the sound, will not be perfect, and also the dynamic range will be affected. So that means that many times teachers will have to adapt a little bit if they talk, for instance, to a violin player about the quality of the tone of what the student is doing. It will be pretty tricky to evaluate very precisely. And this comes down to the technical quality of the connection, but actually also it comes down to the fact that we're picking up the sound with a microphone and playing it back from a loudspeaker. So you can imagine something like the sound of a grand piano, even with a perfect microphone and perfect technical quality. It's still to have the sound radiating from a huge grand piano is not the same as the sound coming out of a very good loudspeaker. So the sound will not be perfect, but we have found here in Copenhagen, our teachers have a lot of experience teaching online, that they actually know how to adapt the way of teaching. So, and if they need to hear a better sound, maybe they can persuade the student to send a recording instead. And the last one that on the list here, when we're talking about limitations that I want to add, is in terms of the language, because the nature of online teaching a lot of times is very international. Of course, now in these strange days where we are now, everyone are teaching online locally as well. But once we teach online internationally, there might be a language barrier. Like most of us right here now are not speaking our native language. And if we are at a meeting with people where we're sitting face to face in the same room, we will always sort of find a way to communicate clearly. But once we teach online, if there is a language barrier, it will become more apparent. I know I have sometimes, if I have been to Germany, had the courage to speak German at a presentation there, but I would never do a German presentation when I'm sitting here now, because suddenly I have to be very clear and very precise. So that's something to be aware of. Even if we have sessions with students that speak very poorly English, maybe we even need to have a translator on board. So moving on to the next slide and try to be a little bit more positive, I want to say a little bit about the possibilities of this. And first of all, right now the situation is, of course, that these systems are a problem solver for a lot of us. Here in Copenhagen, we have basically moved the whole academy, or at least 80% of the academy has moved online within 3 weeks. So it solves a lot of problems for us, because we need to stay teaching and we need to keep doing our exams in the summer and everything. So it solves a lot of problems for us right now. But I could also say that this is actually an opportunity for teachers and students to meet in a new way. Some people call this the third room. So the student has their own place they are, and the teacher has their own teaching space. And now we meet in this common space here. And that is actually a quite new situation for everyone. Some teachers are very confident doing this, that they meet at a new space with the student. And for other teachers, it's actually quite special for them, because you don't have the same sensation that the students is actually visiting you. You are visiting, you're all guests in the third room. So sometimes this can do something to the hierarchy between teacher and student that can be quite interesting. Then another thing, if you can move on 2 slides ahead. Yes, thanks. Is that we can see from some of our research that many times for online learning, the student will actually become more active. They also, usually they actually tend to be there on time more than they usually would, because we have to schedule everything more clearly, and they are more active because they have to play a more active part in finding any technical problems that they have in their playing. So at least when we ask the students, they actually feel positive, that they remember more. It seems like what they are learning is more embodied in them, because they have to be more active in finding solutions. So that's quite positive. And then we have a very good interaction with other e-learning tools. Once we're in a digital space, a session can be recorded and it will appear maybe quite easily in some sort of a learning management system that can be very useful for students. So I'm getting close to the end, but I just want to say some things, if you jump 2 or 3 ahead, and about the etiquette of learning, online learning like this. And first of all, it's very good to have a quite clear plan on what you're doing, and also to start ahead. I know sometimes if I'm at a meeting, maybe people drop into the meeting room half a minute before the meeting starts, and that's just fine. But at a learning room like this, it's very good to be there a little bit before. As maybe you can see, I'm a little bit red on my chins here, because just before I went on here, I had a problem with my microphone. So I had to run around and find a solution to that. So I'm happy that I was here early. So be there ahead, and even try maybe to do a test call the day before to the system, so you familiarize yourself with how everything works. Then it's very important to have a clear communication. I can see that it sounds obvious, I know, but I can see from some of my students that sometimes if I say something, they didn't get what I'm saying. So I need to repeat, but there's a tendency that people are a little bit reluctant to say, sorry, I didn't get that. So you have to speak very clearly. And also you have to maybe ask people very clearly, can you please everyone mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and so on. So this is quite important to make sure that everyone communicates clearly. And I would say, as a teacher, it's an important role for me as a moderator and a teacher to help everyone get into this space where they will communicate very, very clearly. And that's also a point for a meeting like this. We're happy to have Anne Doyle moderating everything. And actually to have the role of a moderator is very important for a session like this. And even for a casual meeting, it becomes quite clearly you need to have a meeting leader. And then my final point here, you can see the third line here before we move on to the next presenter, is that I want to say that video conferencing is very tiring. I've tried to teach last week for 9 hours constantly, almost with no break online, and I feel like I've been running a marathon afterwards. So you should keep an eye on scheduling, both for students but also for teachers, to try to make sure that these sessions are not too long, because they are extremely hyper-focused. So that was the last point for me. And I would like to pass it on here from the cold and rainy and gray Copenhagen, then on to Justin Trigger, who I assume is somewhere more warm in Miami Beach. So over to you, Justin, and thanks for listening in.
Thanks, Jesper. I know you like to joke that English is not your native language, but I always worry about following you in presentations because I think you speak more eloquently than I do, and technically it is my primary language. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk a little bit about what options are available from a commercial standpoint for commodity networks, so home network service that work reasonably well, like the platform we're using now. Next slide, please, Anne. I just want to quickly touch on where we are. As Jesper mentioned, I'm with the New World Symphony, which is an orchestral academy in the United States that's been doing education, arts education online since the early 2000s. So we like to think we have a little bit of experience, but we also are cognizant of the fact that we are not the only experts, and it's great to have these types of gatherings because we always are learning from our colleagues and people who are doing this type of work around the world. Next slide, please. This is just an interior shot of our performance hall, which is equipped for multimedia presentations like Renata talked about. So not just educational, but performance that incorporates network technology as well. Next slide, please. So again, New World Symphony is it's an orchestral academy. We have 87 musicians each year, which make up a professional orchestra contingent. We do 100+ concert productions over the course of a year. Unfortunately, right now we're locked out of our building and not doing those concerts, but we've continued a lot of our programming through the platforms we're going to talk about and through live streaming small concerts like Renata mentioned at the beginning of her speech. So our purpose is basically to create both leaders of orchestral organizations around the world, but also this next generation of musical instructors, arts instructors who are comfortable working in this environment. So very core to what we're talking about today. Next slide, please. So here are your menu options. I almost threw in here a McDonald's logo just to see if anyone would catch it, but this is just what I could throw together in about 30 minutes yesterday as far as logos for platforms that offer interactive communication. So if we go to the next slide, I know the important question everybody wants to know is which one is the best? And I'm going to tell you the answer. And next slide, please. I have no idea. The unfortunate truth of the matter is that it entirely depends on what you want to do and what resources both you and your student have on hand. So let's talk a little bit about these questions. What are your goals? Are you trying to maintain private lesson studios, or are you trying to conduct group dance instruction? Are you trying to conduct visual arts instruction? Are you trying to demonstrate painting techniques? Are you trying to demonstrate digital animation technique? I think it's very important before you even think about what technology you're going to use to consider what you hope to accomplish through using whatever software solution you land on. So having clearly defined goals is way more important than jumping from software solution to software solution, which you could do ad nauseum for days. I'm not an expert at all of those platforms, and I would never say that I am. So other considerations, what resources do you have on hand? And by that, we mean what types of microphones do you have available? What type of devices do you have available? Is it laptops? Is it smartphones? Is it tablet computers? What type of acoustical spaces do you have? I'm in my family's multimedia room, which is not exactly the best acoustic or the best lighting environment, but it's the most private room for doing this type of work, so that's why I'm here. Also, probably most importantly, what type of internet connectivity do you have? Because that's going to determine, really set the bar at least for what you can accomplish from a video and audio perspective. And then once you've had a chance to consider all of those things for yourself, you have to think about all of your students and what resources they have on hand. And that's probably the first step I would recommend for everybody to do, is anyone you're trying to teach online, just understand the landscape of their house, their private learning environment, what technology they have available, what technology they're comfortable using. Because these tools are meant to facilitate what we would normally hope to accomplish in an in-person instruction environment. They're never going to replace that, and they don't satisfy all the requirements and goals of that type of environment, but we're trying to bridge the gap between live instruction and what we can accomplish through these platforms. So having a clear understanding of what tools you have available, what resources you have available, are essential for being able to do this in the best possible way that you can do. Not necessarily what I can do, but what anyone listening is comfortable and able to accomplish. Next slide, please. So when I'm evaluating platforms like the dozens we saw before, I usually use these as general guiding categories. And I use these tools for both the commercial platforms we're talking about now, but also the more advanced platforms that Claudia is going to talk about at the end of this webinar. These are general buckets, and this is just how I, as a technician, as an engineer, evaluate how I would recommend a tool for a particular use case. Next slide, please. They're great categories, but I like to define them just so it's clear what we're talking about, because I don't think that those terms necessarily mean the same thing for everybody. So with ease of use, you know, how hard is it for you as the instructor? How hard is it for you or your students to actually set the thing up and to run it and to participate without getting caught in the technical challenges it may present? Quality, what is the quality at the best operating possibilities of any platform? So if you're using GoToMeeting, you know, what GoToMeeting in the best circumstances, what kind of quality does that offer versus what are the best qualities that Zoom offers when it's running at full capacity? That's how we try to measure platform to platform from a quality perspective. Latency has been talked about. All of these platforms are pretty terrible in terms of latency, but there are distinguishing factors among them. Some work faster than others. And the faster a tool is, simply the faster and easier communication tends to be. So even Jesper referenced the fact that speed of light is a condition we are living with in reality, and it may never be possible to play synchronously with an ensemble across the world. But even in instances where the latency is something like 100, 150 milliseconds, which is too much to play, it's much easier to communicate with that type of a delay versus something like half a second, 1 second, where you're kind of waiting for the other end to understand what was just communicated, and then they have to acknowledge it, and then you have to acknowledge that you understood. So it just severely slows down how people communicate the longer the delays are. And accessibility is the last one. That's just how easy is it to get access to that program? Is it a free app? Is it mobile only? Is it cross-platform? Does it run on every operating system? These are all important questions, again, to weigh against what resources you have on hand, what resources your students have on hand and are comfortable using. So that accessibility in this environment where people are teaching and learning from home, I think is one of the more important against all of the other ones, because quality, latency, ease of use are kind of in the same realm for most of these platforms, but accessibility is a very distinguishing factor for many of them. Next slide, please. So I'm going to share just my personal preference for tools for arts instruction. from home or from private studios. Again, these are my personal preferences. Feel free to debate this with me. I love a healthy debate about how something is better, because I will learn something from that. One of the reasons that Zoom has become so popular is, again, that accessibility situation. It's cross-platform. You can run it on mobile apps. You can run it on desktop, laptop, tablet computers. And the act of joining a meeting is as simple as clicking on a URL, a hyperlink. So again, accessibility. All someone really needs to be able to do is to click a link to enter a Zoom meeting. Maybe they have to download this client that we're running, but it's a very handheld process, so step by step, and it's very difficult to get wrong. Other strengths of Zoom, it obviously does multi-point extremely well. I don't know if I've ever been in a webinar with this many live participants before, but assuming the host can control people's microphones, which is an ongoing challenge, obviously. It handles multi-point exceptionally well. It also handles point-to-point really well. I had a guitar lesson earlier this week for myself over this platform and didn't find anything lacking in terms of what we were trying to accomplish. It also has some baked in features that allow it to do things like stereo sound, which is pretty unique. It allows you to turn off audio processing that is normally used to make speech clear and audible, which is helpful for dynamic acoustic instruments and non-speech-like audio sources. And it has lots of extended features like recording. You can live stream these to a broader audience very easily. Sharing and inviting people to a conference like this one is quite easy as well. So it's got that nice combination of quality, flexibility, accessibility. Latency is, give or take. Skype is the older tool in the toolkit, but it's pretty reliable. It's frequently maintained and updated. The interface is not my favorite, but point-to-point connections are pretty effective. Audio quality really depends on what kind of devices you're using. If you're using audio devices or USB microphones, tends to be a better experience, but it's a contender. And the great thing about Skype is, again, accessibility. It runs on every platform. Most people have used it before, so they're familiar with it to some degree. It's extremely accessible. And then last, and I'm relatively new to this platform, but I had a meeting on it yesterday and I thought it worked really, really well, is Google Meet, which is the next evolution of Google Hangouts. It's based on WebRTC, which people may get into further on in this conversation, but basically WebRTC offers a very high quality audio format if the application using it is designed to use that format. And it sounded like Google Meet was using that in my meeting yesterday, so that's why I'm recommending people check it out. The other really awesome thing about Google Meet is its integration with Google Apps, which are pretty heavily leveraged, at least in the US, and I imagine other places. So for people who are using support materials when they're teaching, if it's documents, playback from YouTube, recording, Google Drive links, like that kind of stuff is just integrated into the box, which is fabulous. Next slide, please. Here's my honorable mention page, and this one comes with caveats. So while most of the tools we've been talking about are interactive, the latencies are too high to play together, as we've discussed. These tools claim to be able to allow playing together over commercial internet services. I personally have only tried both SoundJack and JamKazam, but the experience has been kind of hit or miss for me. JamKazam does offer very high quality audio format. It's a very complicated software to install and run, so it takes a level of technical expertise that's higher than the average person. Duzu is a newer platform, which I took a tour through yesterday. It's kind of like Zoom, but hyper specialized for music instruction. So it allows for cool features like a shared metronome, shared tuner. You can play back backing tracks inside of it and kind of latency compensate for either the student or the teacher. So it allows for you to queue up like backing tracks if you want your student to improvise over something, for instance. It offers recording, live streaming, document integration. It's a neat platform. It's not free and it's fairly new, so I don't know if I can recommend it 100%, but it looked interesting. SoundJack is an audio only platform, so that is a caveat there. There's no video attached to that. And finally, Jamulus is the last solution that I've been hearing works for some people in the States. Again, because we're talking about internet, commercial internet service, most of these tools require a close physical proximity to whoever you're connecting with to be able to play synchronously together. Next slide, please. That's it for me. I would be happy to take questions. My email address is here, and I see Timo in the chat actually shared the same link that I was going to. It's an interesting study from New England Conservatory of Music that did a side-by-side audio transmission comparison between a few of these platforms just to see which actually in practice perform better. And spoiler alert, Zoom was the actual platform they ended up using, assuming you set it up properly for audio streaming. But I would be happy then to extend or hand it over to my friend David Spencer to talk about adapting pedagogy to these platforms, which I argue is way more important than the platform you're using. So take it away, David.
Thanks, Justin. And welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you have joined us today. It's an honor to speak to all of you. I know I see actually a couple of my own students, graduate students online with us, so that's great. I'm going to be talking today about pedagogy, and I know there's a lot of engineers and technical people online, and I do hope that there's plenty of teachers as well, and emerging teachers, because as Justin said, it's great as a practitioner, as a teacher myself who is involved in this as we speak. I have 4 lessons I've got to do today right after this. It's really interesting the amount of questions that I've had to field about, hey, from great teachers about how do we translate our pedagogical material and our inspiration that we can do one-on-one through this distance learning thing, doesn't that sort of dehumanize the whole process? And Jesper and Justin have already talked about that a little bit, and certainly the technical side, and Jesper's done some wonderful research actually on all of this, which was a great inspiration for me, both of them, actually all of the speakers today. But I just want to talk a little bit about the art and the science of teaching, which is pedagogy. And one of the things we know from decades of research is that, great teachers, sorry, next slide in. Great teachers are those that establish high degrees of credibility with their students, right? No matter what the learning environment is. And in music and in dance and in the arts, which we're talking about here today, it is so important, the idea of credibility of a teacher. And there's sort of 4 common, actually there was an article I read just the other day as I was preparing these slides, and it's by Fisher and Fry, just emphasizing this whole idea about credibility of teaching. And I thought, this is probably a good place to talk about pedagogy, because these are the questions really that I've been fielding from all of my international friends over the past couple of weeks as we all transition to this environment. So I want to break that down into sort of 4 common pillars that we know that in my 30 years of teaching and observing and research, we've really narrowed these things down into 4 common pillars that great teachers in the arts all have. And that's trust. And thinking from a student-centered perspective all the time, I always sort of add the question there to let you define the trust. But, can a student rely on you for growth? Confidence, right? Can I learn from you, is what the students think. Energy, are you passionate about my learning from the student perspective? And presence, do I feel close to you as a mentor? And that we know in the arts is so important. We have such a close relationship with all of our students, whether it's acting or dance or music, especially in music from my perspective. Let's move on, Anne. So I just want to discuss how these 4 pillars of teaching translate into the networked environment seamlessly. and how you can maintain them and even amplify them through the networked space of teaching. The first is trust. So Justin very eloquently sort of gave me a nice segue with this, but the first thing you have to do to make sure we maintain and amplify that trust is make sure that you've surveyed your students and find out what types of devices they have access to prior to moving online, so that they will connect to the, and how they're going to connect to the network. Because nothing will lose their trust more than a platform that doesn't work with limitations of the network that they happen to be using. In my case, for my students, 3 weeks ago, when I could sort of see what was coming in higher education, I said, well, I better survey my students just to make sure, what's happening with all of them. And like any class, I think we found that there's a plethora of things. Some of them just have phones. Some of them just have iPads. Some of them had audio interfaces with great microphones, So I developed a sort of a boot camp, technology boot camp, I called it. And I sent out sort of a list of things. Hey, if you have some extra money, here's a couple of cheap ways we can get better audio out of these platforms that Justin just talked about. We happen to be using Zoom for the reasons actually that Justin just amplified, which is that we can actually tweak the sound a little bit and get pretty good audio quality for lessons and group work. But it's really important to do that. The second thing is to make specific suggestions that will make the learning exchange more meaningful if necessary. And again, generally, just small improvements to audio or picture quality will be a significant boost than just, opening up your laptop and trying to use the microphone and the speaker, as we all know. This little thing around most of our necks and ears here, honestly, it's a very cheap way. Most of us got it for free when we bought our phones. And to be honest with you, if that's all one can afford, it's still a better upgrade than nothing. So just make sure that you maintain that trust with students and that you really, really investigate with them what they have. Third thing I would say about just trust and having to do with assessment, because that's the other aspect that people are asking me a lot about. The onboarding of your students into, or the uptake into these technologies, can be a meaningful formative assessment within itself. Like I said, I sort of made it into kind of a boot camp for them, and we had a lot of fun with it. If we can move on into the next slide. So how do we maintain confidence in our students that we're there for them and that they can still learn from us in the online and networked environment? The first is that, as Justin just said, the type of activity has to inform the platform that you will use. I think we've kind of adopted this as a group here at the workshop as our mantra. It's a really, really great thing, and it's one that I think about all the time. There isn't one solution that works best for everyone or every situation. And I think to maintain confidence in your students, we have to choose an appropriate platform for the engagement that you're undertaking. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about something that I'm very keen on, that is layering of technology, both synchronous and asynchronous. The other thing that we need to do to maintain confidence for our students is that you really need to know as a teacher the platform that you're using and how to optimize the settings to create a seamless learning environment for your students. So you need to understand the platform. Don't just pick one because I said Zoom's great for this or Skype is great for this. There isn't one that's great. You need to be able to manipulate and be able to use that platform effectively. And let's move forward, Anne. That third tier then is energy, right? Students need to know in the online sphere that you're still passionate about their learning. It's not just an excuse for us to have a class that we're ticking a box. I don't feel that way about it. For me, Jesper talked about this being the third room. I think it's really important that it is a third room. It's just another avenue of learning. And as a great teacher, remember, great teachers have credibility. And one of the things we have to maintain is that high degree of credibility with our students. So your energy and your passion for what students are trying to do is really important. And I would say, turning to assessment in this case, you have to do what you do. I say that a lot to people, but assessments in the online environment need to be both thoughtful and with the same rigor that students always expect from you as a teacher. Because a lack of authenticity in an assessment in the performing arts really deflates energy. I was reading something that a young lady posted from a pretty major music school here in the United States, and she was just talking about her experiences in online teaching, and she was saying, well, it's such a drag because now our ensemble, we can't really meet, and so the teacher just said, well, just write a paper on something and turn it in, and we'll call it a day. Again, I think there are way more things that we can do, and I'm going to talk about those in just 1 second, by layering technology. I use Zoom sessions paired with things like Socrative or Mentimeter that allows for interaction while you're doing a class. I think that's really important. Again, for me as a teacher, layering technology and amplifying student engagement while we're in the network space is so, so important. So think about this idea of layering. Don't just think of one system, I'm just using Zoom or I'm just using Skype or Polycom. You know, you need to think about multiple systems that you can use simultaneously. I do one-to-one lessons, and I pair it a lot with a platform called Smart Music, which is, again, an accompaniment software that I believe is available in Europe now, but certainly available in the United States. And it's free right now, by the way, if any of you are interested. I've even seen wonderful piano lessons done just using FaceTime because a person only had their phone, but they had disc claviers at both locations, and MIDI data is so small that working over commercial networks, that worked great as well. And you need to think about these ideas of layering technology. I've used Jam Kazam, which Justin just mentioned, for small ensemble activities, and I think teachers, you need to think about that. Using Jam Kazam for small ensemble activities. There is an upstart to it that is a little bit technical, but you can get over it. Again, for teachers, that can be a formative assessment as part of the ensemble rehearsal, is to try really to get people on board with Jam Kazam, because I think the future is pretty clear for all of us of where this network space is going. It's going to become more common, not less common. Let's move on, Ann. I'm just showing this slide really quick because I'm so proud of one of my students who graduated last year, in Memphis. He teaches in the city schools there, and somebody sent out a notice that said, well, music was canceled because of the fact that we're all online. And he immediately created this hashtag that says music is not canceled. And within a week, he sponsored this Memphis area virtual youth choir for students that were displaced out of their programs. You can go on YouTube and watch it. It's an amazing thing. We've seen things like this before, but I think the initiative he took to say, hey, music is not canceled just because we are not all meeting face to face. And it's important for us to be creative about that. Let's move forward, Ann. The last thing I want to talk about is that last pillar is presence. How do we maintain that closeness with our students in the networked environment? And I think for me, it's communication. And you need to communicate with your students regularly and often. And that's not just in the higher education sphere, but it's also in the K through 12 sphere, primary school, secondary school sphere in Europe. I send things to my students almost every day. That may be overdoing it a little bit, but it's not extensive stuff. It's little things like, hey, you need to check out this concert, or hey, we're doing a webinar tomorrow. You can log in and find out more about what we're doing. Or, hey, here's a great article I just read about a music teacher in Fargo, North Dakota, and how she's still teaching her orchestra of 300 through Zoom or through Skype. So communication is really, really important. Don't be afraid. I know we're talking today about synchronous learning, but don't be afraid to use an asynchronous platform. I love to use Flipgrid, and I'm using it right now as a kind of formative performance assessment tool where my students, because normally, you know, in a performance teaching situation, we do master classes every week, whether that's acting or dance or music. And my students don't have that opportunity to get together once a week as a group, but we do on Flipgrid. And one of the things that we do is I'll put a little assignment, or I'll say, hey, we're going to record etudes this week. And everybody sort of does their etude, and we can all come together and see them and listen to them. If that's something that violates some FERPA in the United States for some people, but they can be used for assessments in the K-2 through 12 environment too. I know some of my students who are teaching in public schools are using Flipgrid, an asynchronous platform, to do scale tests and to pass off parts of their music as we're going forward. Third thing I would say is utilizing live streaming technologies for summative performance assessments. We are a doctoral granting institution at the University of Memphis, and one of the things that obviously we do is a lot of recitals and a lot of degree recitals. And one of the biggest questions that came up for us a couple of weeks ago was, hey, how are we going to do these summative assessments, these recitals for these doctoral students and master's students and people at the undergraduate level who are graduating? You know, how are they going to do their recital? And I said, hey, look, it's easy. We just need to be able to live stream it, and we need to, you know, do the assessment that way. And we didn't have the infrastructure, although I've been pushing for it for a long time. This crisis has kind of given some places like us a chance to actually upgrade our infrastructure really quickly, because you can go to the provost and say, hey, what are we going to do? And so they quickly found some money that we didn't have for the past 5 years. And we have a system in place now. And we just did, if you can move to the next slide, Ann, we just did our first live streamed recital yesterday. One of my students there in the middle, Cortez, and the students I had them all take selfies of themselves watching the recital. So this was a great thing. And these can be used for summative assessments like recitals and things like that. So again, music's not canceled, dance isn't canceled, acting isn't canceled. We need to be able to do some live streaming if possible, and create these sort of virtual audiences for ourselves. And we can move on to the next one. And last, oh, sorry, maybe back. How about that? Back. Yeah, there we go. Back one more. Great. So the last thing I would say, well, not to promote any particular thing, but one of our solutions quickly was to just buy this system called Mevo, which is a really simple and effective lower cost solution. If you're just getting started in this sphere, it's, you know, the whole system you can get for less than $900, and it really works quite well, and the startup is pretty minimal. Last thing I would say is that, you know, even with live streaming, you can do this layering idea. One of the things that we're doing is actually creating a virtual audience for the performers who are live streaming without an audience because of social distancing. We're using Zoom. I created a virtual background. The students just join a meeting. We can project that on a screen in front of the performer that's there. They can watch the live stream on another device, and the performer actually has an audience to play for. So I think that's really, really super important from an assessment point of view. We've got to keep the quality of what we do. The arts are qualitative, they're not quantitative, and we need to understand that our assessments have to be qualitatively based and with the same rigor that we expect all the time. So I hope that's helpful. I want to hand it over to two of the absolutely smartest people that I know on the planet right now.
And I want to jump in for just a minute to
sure.
say we can run over, and we hope all of you will stay with us. And I also sent the email group that's you can ask questions during or after the workshop is over. So let's move on to Maria Isabel.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Anne. Good afternoon and good morning for everybody. I'm glad to be here and share this session with so many people from so many different places. Claudio and I are going to talk about advanced tools for future instruction. And why advanced? Because this is not something you are going to do at home. If you go to the next slide, please, Anne, you will see that these days we have to stay at home. This is something we must do. It's just to stop that. But we have artists that are working also from home. We have concerts from the living room. We have quarantine fests doing from home. And all the artists are trying, sorry? Oops. All the artists are trying to do something to help in this situation with the music and the art. If you go to the next slide, please, Anne, this is one example of what happened here in Barcelona last week. We have a band of two artists. They are brothers. They are very popular here, and they announced via Twitter. It's in Spanish, but I guess you can have the feeling of what it was. We're playing live. We're playing live on Friday, so please join our Instagram, and we are going to do this. Okay, the news on the newspaper, on the local newspaper, the day before on Saturday was that the latency didn't allow them to play together, surprisingly. Well, that's something that we know. If you go to the next slide, we have participated in many live interactive sessions, and this is why I am here. I'm not a super expert on tools, but I am a user of these tools, and I have been helping some of the institutions connected to our network. I work for CSUC. This is a consortium of universities in Catalonia. We manage the regional research and education network here, and some of our connected institutions have participated in this kind of events, from the Liceu Opera House, the Opera Oberta course, to the Museum of Contemporary Art, the University Pompeu Fabra, for instance. All of them are doing things for art, and usually in this case it was opera at the beginning and dancing later. The Opera Oberta course was some live streaming. It was not interactive, but somehow it was quite live because it was just a 4-second delay. This is not much, but it's impossible for an interactive session. It was used, it was with Videolan, the software was Videolan, which was great. The quality was excellent from the Opera House. You could just send this to many people in the universities, in more than 50 universities, and they were seeing the opera live. That was great. All the other examples in this slide are for interactive sessions, and we have used different softwares and hardwares for that. For instance, Polycom and UltraGrid, and Claudio will explain Lola at the end. If you go to the next slide, please, Anne, Renate already told us what's important for interactive sessions, for interactive performances. And the key to success is clearly network and tools. If you don't have the network or if you don't have the tools, you are not going to succeed trying to do an interactive performance. This is an example of a dancer dancing with a high definition tool, a very good tool that could have done amazing images for that, but the network has packet loss. This means if the network doesn't work, you are not seeing any dancer here. You're seeing something like weird. In the next slide, you see the opposite thing. If you go there, you see a gigabit network, an excellent network, not a home network, a really, really good one. Without packet loss, everything is excellent, but the standard video conferencing tool doesn't allow us to have all the quality we need. You don't have a good image. The audio is not good for music. The audio may be good for a conversation because you have, if you have a conversation, any video conferencing tool is good. But if you need to listen to music, not any video conferencing tool is good because the echoes may be canceled. If the video conferencing tool detects the same pattern in the audio, it will cancel it because it will detect it as echo. And you don't want that because music has echo. So this is something you also have to take into account. If you have the right network and the right tools, you get things like the next slide, please, Anne. You have this. This is an example of near in the distance too. We have the dancer on the left side of the screen is in Vienna. The dancer on the right side is in Barcelona. They are dancing together, and I can swear they really seem to be in the same place at the same time, and they were miles away. How did we get that? With a good tool. In this case, it was UltraGrid, but I will start with the previous one. We have used Polycom several times. If you go to the next slide, please, Anne, and I'm sorry, I'm going too fast. But Polycom is one of the tools we have used. And if you don't have a lot of bandwidth, that's fine. If you don't need interaction for music, but if you need interaction for dance, it can be suitable for this. Polycom, the hardware platforms are commercial solutions. You have to buy them. It's not so cheap, but they are able to send good quality music. They have a thing that they call the music mode. This mode allows to avoid this echo cancellation I mentioned before, and it works very well to send this information, this music, and this video to the other side. The bandwidth used is relatively low. If you use less bandwidth, you will have less quality or more delay, but at least you can manage. It's from 128 kilobit per second to 6 megabit per second. That's not bad, with compression, of course. And there's also an available version of a desktop application that is called Real Presence Desktop. Some examples that we have done with this tool: I'm longing for the impossible, for the moment it is real, with the Royal Danish Academy of Music and Studio Visco, and well, with the Danish Research and Education Network and the participation with these networks, all the research and education networks in Jan. And also the Infinite Bridge with the Royal College of Music in London. Here you have on the right, this is a snapshot of the bandwidth of the network occupancy when we did that. And the next slide is some images of this. The Polycom is the app right image. This is the hardware that we use to send the image of the two dancers on the left to London, and they dance together with the people in London who were on stage. The picture on the bottom side is horrible because it was taken with my telephone and to a screen and shooting to a screen, so it's not the best one, but at least it gives you the image that they were dancing together, even if some of them were in London, some of them were in Barcelona. The next tool is UltraGrid. Thanks, Anne. UltraGrid is a tool that we have used many times for all the near in the distance performances, 1, 2, 3 with Econet, and also for a short journey into folded space with Studio Visco and with Brighton in JISC too, last year, sorry. And I wish I would dance well under the star with ChessNet, with the Tech Research and Education Network. UltraGrid was developed by ChessNet, is developed by ChessNet, and the good thing about it is that it's open. It's available on GitHub. You can download it. You can put it in your computer, but it requires a powerful hardware. This means you cannot put it in any laptop and it works. It's not like that. The resolution range, it goes to up to 4K. It's good. It can do compress or compress streams up to 10 gigabit per second, nearly. And the bandwidth goes from 12 megabit per second to 8 gigabit per second. And you can see here, I'm a network technician and I speak too much about network parameters. I'm sorry about that, but I think it's good to have an idea of how many bandwidth or how much bandwidth I need. If you are at home, you are not going to have 8 gigabit per second. This is something that you get when you are in a research and education network. You need research and education networks and low latency tools. UltraGrid has more or less 40 milliseconds. It's suitable for interactive dance. We have used it many times. And for music, it depends on the distance, of course, because it's just close to the border. If the distance is very high, then it's difficult, and it also depends on the music. And an example of this, it's in the next slide. This is, again, near in the distance, but this time it's near in the distance 3. The dancer is in Linz, the female dancer, this is a different one, is in Barcelona, and they are also playing this game of dancing together while they are so far away. And finally, my next slide is just to say thank you. These are the artists that played last year with Studio Visco in the Museum of Contemporary Art. If you have any questions, I will be delighted to answer them, but maybe because we are a little bit late, it's better that you send them to the email and send. And then I will give the word to Claudio. He's the real expert in low latency tools, and he will talk about Lola. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Maria Isabel, and welcome to everybody. Well, yes, the title says it all. Lola means low latency. And the very deep goal of Lola itself was to make the latency of the tool and of the application as lowest as possible. So it's quite clear. I mean, this is something that is achievable only if you have some special conditions at the moment. But don't be desperate because, for example, think of electronic mail. How many of you had electronic mail in 1991? Probably only me. Now you all have it. How many of you were able to do a video conferencing 20 years ago? Probably only a few of us, and now you're all here. So it's going to happen anyhow. You will be able to use UltraGrid or Lola at home sooner or later, probably sooner now that we have this situation, because there is being a big push to make home networking much better than what it is. And people are acting to do that. Also, the tools are getting better. So next slide, please. And so when Lola was born when we were trying to make a masterclass, so a lesson which should be interactive, between Pisa in Italy and New World Symphony in Miami in 2005, and the latency was half a second. You can imagine the disaster of it. It worked, but it is true, video conferencing is tiring, and the people doing the lesson after that had a headache, of course, because half a second delay means you are on a walkie-talkie. So at that time, people had the dream to play together and make distance disappear. As it has been said before, distance cannot disappear because of the speed of light. Apart quantum technology, maybe we'll be able to do it later on in the future, but not now. But if you go to the next slide, please, and this is what you need to play really together. This is something all musicians know, even if they are in the same room. If they are too far away, the first row of the orchestra and the percussion in the last row of the orchestra are late. That's why the percussionist always plays ahead. He knows it very well. Otherwise, out of the beat. And this always happens in all the time. These are all the conditions that you need if you want to really play together. And this is what Lola is trying to emulate as much as possible, because it has been invented just to play music together. And the idea of Lola is also to play music for education, is not to make a concert. The fact that we can make a performance is just a side product of it, but it is designed to make lessons, to teach and so on. So of course you need art. Without any art, you don't do a good music and a good lesson as well. So the next one, please. So let's, given that these days we at the Lola team get about 200 messages per day by all the people which want to use Lola to play at home and to make lessons at home because they read that it has zero latency or very low latency. Let's be very clear what Lola is not and what Lola is. Lola is not a software or an app. You don't just download and install it. It is not an online platform like Gem-Kazam. You don't get an account and play. It is not a service that you run into a browser. It is not something like WebRTC application, which you just open a link and you play. And it is not a service which allows you to connect many sites. The reason for this is that Lola uses a lot of resources. And if you want to connect to more than 3 sites, the number of resources might be unavailable even to the biggest supercomputing center in the world now. Technically, you can do it, but it is not worth. So if you make a system which only one person can use to rocket to the moon, then only one person will be able to use it, and it's not scope. And last but not least, Lola is not an audio-only system. Lola is made with video, and you cannot switch off video out of it, otherwise it does not work. So what is it? It's a multi-component system that you need to install everywhere. So even if you are in a higher education institution with very good network and so on, Lola must be also on the other end. So if it is on the other end in another institution, that's fine. But if it is in the student's home, then the student have to have exactly the same stuff that you have. So it has optimized to make the latency as low as possible. So it also uses state-of-the-art technology. It is not impossible to get the technology. You will see it in a future slide. It's something you can even go and buy into a shop yourself. That's not the problem. But one back, please, Hen. But of course, it is state of the art. It is optimized for music, so it delivers studio quality multi-channel audio. LoLa delivers you exactly what gets out of the instrument, of most of the instrument. I had many discussions with David, for example, how to get out the trumpet sound correctly on a microphone is not easy, but what you get into the microphone is what you get out on the other side. And of course, you can also use to do performances, but it is tailored for teaching and rehearsing. So next one, please. So LoLa is made of 3 components. A highly optimized software, that's easy. The software is for free for all educational things. You just download it and install it. That's the easy part. You need specialized hardware, which means a computer, but also audio and video professional sound systems and very specialized, for example, microphone and so on. But that's not the difficult part because you can buy them and it is not even so expensive because, I mean, luckily the people which are doing gaming online exist since a number of years. And they are the one pushing the industry to produce very high efficient and very low cost computers. And you can buy a gaming computer and then you can run LoLa. And you can, even if you are a student, you can buy a computer. What we are doing now, we are working to create a version which perfectly works on a laptop. And a laptop high-end gaming computer does not cost more than $1,500. You can buy it, it's easy. Then you buy an audio interface, which might be quite a medium range one. It's another $300. You buy a good microphone and a good high-speed camera, which is one of the things that LoLa needs, and you go. The problem is the very high-end network because that's not everywhere now. So the next one, please. So LoLa is good hardware. You buy a high-end gaming PC, good GPU, etc., fast monitor. They are all available in the shop. You buy them. You can buy a machine video camera. It is not a webcam, but the reason for it is that, of course, a camera like the one you see there on the screen is exactly designed to be fast. These are the cameras which you have into the cars now, and not only in the cars which self-drives, but also in the cars where the camera tells you you're going to bump into the back because you're too close to the next car while you're parking. So they're very common hardware. You can buy them, but they're not a webcam. And of course, the most important thing, good audio in, good audio out, bad audio in, bad audio out. So you need something which is professional for the part of audio. So professional stuff like microphone, mixer, audio monitors, and so on. A very bad microphone gives a bad sound. And now I'm using a professional microphone for music and for voice, so that's probably the reason why you hear me not so bad. So the next one, please. LoLa is also an excellent network, and that's a big problem that it has in being used at home. It really needs, if you want to perform in full shape, a 1 gigabit upload and download, clean, stable services. You can also run it at 100 megabit, again, very stable upload and download. Of course, the research and education networks can deliver it. A number of commercial networks are trying to deliver it, but they are not there. They are very, very well behind. Because the idea of the network that they deliver is that the network is something that you use for downloading stuff. You are using contents. It's a television. It's not a network to interact what they deliver. Luckily, already a number of years ago, in some places, operators started to deliver a different kind of service. There are some real gigabit cities, well, small towns, I should say, where at home, what you get from a commercial provider is a real gigabit network. The problem is that when you get a real gigabit network at home, within the city where the provider operates, you can run things like LoLa, but outside you still cannot because the commercial backbone still cannot make it. But we have example of that where things can happen. Opelica is one, for example. I know another example, for example, in Vermont. Burlington, the local provider delivers a real fiber 1 gigabit to every house. They can play LoLa at home. So it's coming, don't worry. It will happen everywhere sooner or later. So the next one, please. Some of the features of LoLa, why it is enabling you to play together. Because as UltraGrid is 5 milliseconds, LoLa is only 5. UltraGrid is 40 milliseconds, LoLa is only less than 5 milliseconds. Because it's very well optimized inside the hardware and the software. So the latency of the device is low, and then you only have the latency of the network. Beware of the latency of the network. Like I say here, distances up to 3,500 kilometers are okay to play with LoLa. If you go beyond, then again, the physics and Einstein came into matter, and you cannot do it because the speed of light is the speed of light. One of the jokes I made once was, Scotty, beam me up. It doesn't work. We are not on the Starship Enterprise or on Star Trek or stuff like that. And it will never happen for the moment. The video is also very important for LoLa because you need to see very well. So it runs at 60 frames per second. Why 60 frames per second while we only see maybe 20 or 25? Because it makes a difference. If the video is 25, our brain gets tired. If the video is 60, our brain does not. There are a number of studies made in psychology and neurology which prove exactly why that. I'm not going to tell you details of it, but if the video is 60 frames per second, you are not tired after watching it because the brain reacts in a more natural way and so on. It can connect up to 3 locations and use up to 4 cameras. Why 4 cameras? Because when you are teaching, you need to see the student from different viewpoints. In a room, you walk around the student, you look at the back of the violinist or the front of the fingering and so on, also for a piano. You cannot do it easily. You're not piloting a robot which is walking around the student, but with 4 cameras, you can do something similar to it, or at least get close to it. Of course, networking, as I said, is important, but it's coming. Some location can do it, some other will do it, probably in the next 5 or 10 years, but not now. So the big question that many people ask us, why don't you make a LoLa in the little, a small LoLa? The reason is very simple, because if you do it like like that, then we go the same level as Zoom or Skype or the others. It doesn't make any sense. But we are working on making a version of it which may be more usable in the houses of the student already. Probably in the next couple of years you will have it, but not now, I'm sorry. We are late for the emergency. The next one, please. So just to conclude, it's not for everywhere use, but you don't drive downtown with a Formula 1 car, also because the police will stop you and kidnap your car because you don't have a number plate and you're not authorized to drive downtown. But of course you go and see the Indianapolis race and stuff like that. So just wait for a while, and we are working to bring it down also to you. Another problem that you have with such a car, there's no place for the shopping bag. So you don't go shopping with it. And that's another problem that you have with LoLa. You don't go shopping, you don't do it everywhere, every time, but you can do a wonderful masterclass and so on. So some more information, next one, please. Here where you can ask questions, of course, we are all available online. I've seen that on the chat, there were also some interesting questions that we will try to answer later on, but hopefully this is not the last workshop that we do. And I let to Anne to conclude.
And I thank all of you for joining us, especially a big thanks to all of our presenters today. And thank you for 116 of you who stayed a whole extra 30 minutes to be able to hear all of our great presenters. We will host another one of these soon, and we welcome your questions in this email group. All of the presenters are in this question group, and so please feel free to write us and we will respond. Thank you, everybody. Be safe and stay well.
Thank you. And ask us what you want to hear from us so we tailor the next workshop.
Yes. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, bye,
Bye.
bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you.